My name is Robin Joyce Miller, Robin J. Miller. Who am I? Well, let's see. I've been a teacher. I started off as a special education teacher, followed my heart, and became an art teacher when I took a sabbatical. Then during that time, I worked my way into becoming an artist. I looked at children's books. I looked at the art of great people, master artists, in particular African-American artists, and I was inspired. What do? Well, I create art, I write poetry, I go places and do slideshow presentations. I just love being an artist and a writer and a performer. I told you that I'm Robin Joyce Miller, but I'm also R.J. Scribbles. R.J. Scribbles is the first name that I came up with for myself as an artist. R.J. Scribbles is my children's art. It's the pen name I use when I do I did my back to school book. I have a peace and racial harmony poem. I tell stories about children, and I did cartoon art. So that was my first introduction to doing art, was my cartoon work, and R.J. Scribbles is the name that I use to do my poetry and my art. How did I become an artist? Well, really, as a child, I was into music. However, my father was an artist, but I never really understood that DNA could be passed on, and I didn't show my talent as an artist so much as a child. Later on, I realized how much I loved art, and I would just practice. And as a teacher, I would draw, copy the illustrations in children's books. I found that I was just absolutely attracted to colors. At one point I wanted to be an interior decorator. I stripped the wood in my bedroom and redesigned my bedroom. So I've always had this artsy kind of thing going on. I also showed my artistic talent in cooking. But later, once I discovered that art is what I really love, then I just pursued that, jumped into it full force. There are quite a few artists who inspire me. First of all, Vincent van Gogh inspired me because as an art teacher, I looked at his Starry Night and I started teaching that, and I loved his impasto, his thick, the way he layered paint in a thick way. And so I knew a lot. I started looking at the European artists. However, what really excited me was African American artists, because in school I never learned about them. I heard about Monet, I heard about Matisse, I heard about those people, but I never heard of people like Jacob Lawrence and Romare Bearden, William H. Johnson and Faith Ringgold. I came across Faith Ringgold when I was teaching and I saw the book Tar Beach, and that's how I first started to see her work. I fortunately got a chance to meet Faith Ringgold, and she became my mentor. And to even now, with the piece that you see behind me, I did that as a dedication to her 80th birthday. I chose this particular art form that I called mixed media collage. It's very different. It's not something that I saw anyone else do. It started when I took a sabbatical and I was home, and I studied materials. I played around with paper. My first art that I played around with was printmaking, and that encouraged me to buy different kinds of paper. I started working on paper and creating abstract, non-objective type pieces where I was just ripping paper and using fabric paint. So I went to the store and I bought all these materials, and I was just playing around with the materials. And it evolved to, if I can do abstract pieces that are non-objective, maybe I can do pieces that are figurative. And so I started drawing pieces, drawing simple drawings, and using tracing paper, and then using it almost quilt-like. So my tracing paper became like a pattern. And so I would cut my pieces of paper. First of all, I bought decorative paper. I was excited by the paper and the texture and using the paint, which has become my signature. The fabric paint that goes on the border is my signature. People started to say, well, it looks like a mosaic. It looks like glass, cut glass. So once I started doing that, I found it exciting. And it was exciting to do something that I didn't see other people doing. So these days it's evolving and changing. I'm using more materials that are three-dimensional, not big materials, but small, adding beads and maybe a few stones, model magic. Some of the materials that I used as an art teacher, they're finding their way into my art. So as I said, this is a mixed media collage, and it's unique. I focus on pattern, texture, color, and visual rhythms. Visual rhythms are, in music, rhythm is a beat that repeats itself. Visual rhythms are also repetition of line, shape, and color. So if you look at my work, I select maybe 5 or 6 colors that I focus on. I take my papers out, lay them out like a decorator might lay out their papers, and then I stay with those colors. And I want your eye to move across, so those colors will repeat themselves in different places. Certain shapes will repeat themselves. Certain shapes will repeat themselves. So that's pretty much what you'll see when you look at my art, a repetition. And as far as theme, what you're looking at here is the garden party. The center of the garden party is Faith Ringgold. She's a master artist, an amazing artist who does her work, much of her work on quilts. However, she does so many different types of works. This particular piece is I did in honor of her 80th birthday. In 2007, I went along to the garden party with my husband. My husband wrote the poem, The Garden Party. The next year, I performed the poem at her garden party, and it starts off with live jazz, tickles the ear, while a canopy of trees redesigned the sky. So that's the beginning of the poem. And when I heard my husband's words over and over again, as her 80th birthday was approaching, I decided I wanted to do that. I wanted to do the garden party. I wanted to show the live jazz. She has a pond, and a koi pond, and their fish. Her gazebo is there. People wear hats, and sometimes she does a garden party piece. So here you see the people wearing hats. In this piece, this was the first time I added silk flowers to it, so it became layered. I also created a quilt going around. There's Cassie, who is the center of, the Tar Beach, her Tar Beach book. And Cassie is at her garden party, sometimes sitting in a chair, a doll. And so I had to include Cassie at the garden party. Faith wears elaborate clothes. Sometimes it's absolutely welcoming and brilliant. And so you see here Faith in all her glory welcoming you to the garden party. And the poem goes around the border that my husband wrote. One day, I hope to possibly turn this into a book. Okay, what we're looking at here is the Inauguration Day quilt. I think that it was the most historic and proud moment in African American history. I was very excited to do this piece. It is the last piece in my African American history collection. It is part of this book. It is the cover of the book because I just said I have to put that. I didn't know that I would live to see something like this. I know our ancestors would have loved to have seen Barack Obama take his oath. And for this piece, I wanted to give you a feeling of the crowd, the parade, the oath, Aretha, the dance, inauguration dance. I'm going to do the poem for you. Obama, Obama, a day to scream and shout. Obama, Obama, massive crowds came out. The trumpets bellowed loudly, the bells rang through the air, pomp and circumstance was felt, just magic everywhere. People waved their flags about, the red, the white, the blue. Echoes of a dream once heard, sweet victory come true. Prayers were lifted, speeches made, Aretha came to sing. From every mountainside we know, let peace and freedom ring. My country, 'tis of the sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Obama's oath was taken. Hail to the chief was played. The cannons fired through the air. Out rolled his motorcade. They cruised past waving people. You heard more screams and shouts. God bless our first black family en route to the White House. Glory, hallelujah, I heard our forefathers sing. From every mountainside we know, let peace and freedom ring. Okay, what we're doing now is we are looking at a piece that was inspired by Romare Bearden. I call it either Romare's Band or Three Musicians. This is part of my Jazz in the Art class collection. As an art teacher, I had a curriculum called Jazz in the Art class. And the poem, I wrote a poem that goes with it, and the stanza about Bearden goes something like this. You know there's jazz in the art class. We're quilting out the history like Faith Ringgold, making those patches big and bold. Now I'll jump to the Bearden part. Bearden made jazz a visual thing. And that's why in our art class we make our art sing, because there's jazz in the art class. And the stanzas are all about different artists who have been inspired by jazz. So I would say, as an art teacher, my work as an art teacher inspired the art that you see. So Bearden was clearly someone who I was not familiar with. Before art, I'm really a self-taught artist. While I was a special education teacher, I started looking at art, and once they asked me to become an art teacher, I studied the great artists, and in particular, the African American artists, and made sure that they were in my curriculum. This one is one of the pieces that honored Romare Bearden. Okay, we are now standing in front of the piece that I call A Humble Village. This work was done as part of a collection that I wanted to create a book to raise money for Uganda, children in Uganda. Humble stands for Helping Ugandan Mwana by Loving Example. Mwana is a Lugandan word for child. So I wrote a little story because a friend of mine at my school, who was a social worker, she would go to Uganda every year under the auspices of the Methodist Church to raise money, to participate, to be actively engaged with children at Humble Place in Uganda. And I heard they needed money, so I wanted to do something to raise money for it. So with this book, I created this piece from looking at her photographs, discussing what they do in Uganda. This work was exhibited along with all the other pieces from the book at the Brooklyn Children's Museum. I'll just do a little bit of this. In a humble Ugandan village, the sun rises over the hills and all is quiet until a red rooster crows. Young girls fetch water from a river that flows. Cows moo as they graze in the grass. As you can see, this is a wonderful book for young children, and it inspires them to think about and look at Uganda, an African country.